The influence of early experience. The main thing in child's development is the environment, not the genes. Studies have shown that even twins, if they grow up in different conditions and are brought up by different people, will be very different from each other, both in character and in abilities. The question is what kind of education and environment best develop a child's potential abilities. A child born of a scientist father will not necessarily become a scientist. If the origin was a determining factor in the formation of abilities, then children would inherit the professions of their fathers generation after generation. But life is much more interesting, and it's not so rare that the child of a scientist becomes a violinist and the doctor becomes a writer. The most unexpected things affect the child. Carl Friedrich Gauss, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 19th century, discovered the formula for the sum of arithmetic series when he was only 8 years old. Gauss' father was not distinguished by scholarship. He was a simple bricklayer, repaired walls, fences, fireplaces, and often took his son with him to work. Gauss handed his father bricks and counted them. Apparently, Gauss' mathematical abilities were formed under the influence of this habit in early childhood. What parents think is unimportant and meaningless, a child can perceive with such sensitivity and strength that these experiences can become the basis of his entire future life. The impressions of early childhood determine the further way of thinking and actions of the child. What is useful for the baby? There are no ready-made recipes for teaching babies. The detailed advice that I am going to give you should be perceived only as ideas on the basis of which any mother can make her decision and accept or reject this or that advice in accordance with a certain character or stage of development of the child. Take the child in your arms more often. The baby is offended, but his mother takes him in her arms and he stops crying and smiles. Who is not familiar with this situation? Every parent has experienced this hundreds of times. So a child may develop the habit of trying to achieve the fulfillment of their desires by crying. They frighten parents. Is it so? For a baby who knows no other way of self-expression, crying is the only way to attract attention to himself. When he cries, it means that he is asking for something, and to leave his request unanswered means to deprive him from the very beginning of communication. Sound meaning proves that the communication of a child with his mother, and especially tactile communication, is very important for his mental development. Don't be afraid to take your child to bed with you. You can find a new meaning in the habit of sleeping next to a child if you think about his mental development. For example, a mother who has her hands full all day and does not have enough time to communicate with her child can at least lie next to him until he falls asleep. During this short time, the baby is completely calm and very receptive. Therefore, if you do not just lie next to him but sing him a song, it will have a positive developmental effect on the child. Even an hour of classes a day leads to amazing results. The book The Revolution in Infant Education, published in America, describes an experiment in teaching 30 babies at the age of 15 months in poor areas. Every day except Sunday, the teacher spent 1 hour with the child, playing and talking with him. The test results obtained when these babies were already 2 years and 3 months old showed that the level of intellectual development and especially the level of speech development in these children was clearly higher than that of their peers who did not participate in the experiment. Sometimes we do not even suspect that all the most ordinary words and actions of his mother are already imprinted in the child's brain. So mothers who talk a lot with the child have a huge impact on his intellectual development. Don't babble with the child. Probably in all countries, people often talk to children in their children's language. Communicate with your baby in an adult full-fledged language and you will make an invaluable contribution to his development. A newborn feels when parents are in a quarrel. It is very easy to tell by the baby's face when his parents are fighting, quarreling, conflicting. His expression is depressed and restless. It is very important to develop the ability to reason, evaluate, perceive. There are no special programs for this, and only the way parents behave, what they do and feel, how they talk to the baby, can form a child's personality. A father should communicate with his child more often. Often as adults, our children remember those pleasant hours with joy, as a holiday, which they spent with their father, because as a rule in many families it was not so often. To be a true friend and as assistant to his wife isn't the role of a husband in home education. A harmonious atmosphere in the house cannot be achieved only by maternal efforts. It is impossible to raise a truly good person in a family where the work of raising and developing a child lies entirely with mom, and that only sometimes at her request gets involved in these worries. No lack of time or a fatigue after work should prevent dads from communicating with their children as much as possible. Communication of children among themselves should be encouraged. The baby will benefit even more if he has physical contact not only with mom, dad, brothers and sisters, but also with other children. This stimulates his mind, develops a sense of competitiveness, sociability, and a desire to be the best. Now people are communicating less with each other, and this cannot but affect the level of intelligence development in children. Considering this, it would be nice if, at least for the sake of their own children, mothers tried to get together more often. Quarrels develop a child's communication skill. It is often said that a person is a product of society and that he cannot live outside of it. At about 2 years old, the child becomes uninterested in playing only with himself. He begins to play with others, and then, for the first time, he learns how to interact in a group. When he is playing peacefully with others and when he quarrels, he learns to live in a team. Quarrels are important because they develop personal initiative. Children have their own logic and they communicate with each other in their own way. There is no place for adult logic here. If you consider children's quarrels from the point of view of adults, try to persuade them that it is impossible to fight and that the one who quarrels with others is bad. Your child will only withdraw into himself and get angry. Quarrels are the first lesson of life in a team. The child should be praised, not scolded. Of the two methods, encouragement and punishment, the latter seems to be more effective. But it's not quite so. Punishment can cause a child to have the opposite reaction, open disobedience. The fact is that both praise and punishment should be used very carefully. Imagine a mom carrying a glass of juice to the table. Her baby, who already wants to initiate his mother in everything, is trying to do the same. And mom says, "You can't," and rushes to him in horror that he will spill the juice. This is wrong. She will also reproach the child later when he grows up that he does not help her. Even if the child wants to do something that it is still difficult for him, it is better to praise him. How big you have become, then pour some juice and let him carry a glass. This approach is very important.